The backhand landed across her face in the middle of Manhattan's finest restaurant. The crack of impact silencing 50 conversations at once. Valentina's hand flew to her 7 months pregnant belly as her chair tipped backward, terror flooding her eyes. Not for herself, but for the baby she'd sacrificed everything to protect. The man in the black suit rising from the corner table wasn't just another witness. He was FBI Special Agent in Charge Damon Cruz, and he just watched his little sister get struck by the billionaire who promised to cherish her. What drives a man to raise his hand against a pregnant woman in public? Have you ever loved someone who slowly became a stranger? Have you watched someone you care about trapped in a relationship that's killing them? This isn't just about one slap. It's about the warning signs we ignore, the red flags we explain away, and the price we pay when love turns toxic. What happens when wealth meets violence, when family loyalty collides with the law, and when a woman must choose between the man she married and the child she's carrying? Drop a comment right now. If you saw this happen in front of you, would you intervene immediately or call the authorities? Let's talk about what real courage looks like. But to understand how we got here, how a fairy tale romance became a public nightmare, we need to go back 5 years, to a charity gala in Boston where a working-class girl from Philadelphia met a man who seemed too good to be true. She was already doubting her choice to come here, until the billionaire looked at her like she was the only woman in the room. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. A world so far removed from Valentina's Philadelphia neighborhood that she felt like an imposter in her borrowed dress. She stood near the service entrance, clipboard in hand, checking off donations for the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. This was her job tonight, coordinating volunteers, not mingling with guests who wore watches worth more than her annual salary. At 28, Valentina Cruz had learned to move through wealthy spaces without believing she belonged in them. Social work degree from Temple University. 2 jobs, one at a community center in North Philly, another waitressing weekends. She sent money home to her mother every month and crashed on her brother's couch more often than she admitted. Borrowed dresses and pride were all she had, in abundance. "Excuse me, miss." A voice cut through her mental inventory. "Could you direct me to the restrooms?" She looked up into the face of a woman dripping in diamonds and pointed down the hall without missing a beat. This was her world tonight, invisible, useful, forgotten. Then Garrison Holloway took the stage. The ballroom hushed as the tech billionaire approached the microphone. 42 years old, 6 feet of tailored confidence in a suit that probably cost what she made in 6 months. His keynote speech had the crowd leaning forward. Stories of building his empire from Seattle basements to Manhattan boardrooms, of remembering where he came from even as he climbed higher. "Which is why," he concluded, "I'm pledging $10 million to ensure every child in Boston has access to quality health care, regardless of their family's income." The applause shook the chandeliers. Valentina felt it in her chest, not just the noise, but the significance. 10 million could change thousands of lives. For a moment, she forgot to feel out of place. She was carrying champagne flutes on a tray, weaving through the crowd during the reception when disaster struck. Someone bumped her elbow. The tray tilted, and she watched in horror as golden liquid arced through the air, landing directly on Garrison Holloway's pristine white shirt and $5,000 suit jacket. Time stopped. "Oh God," she gasped, setting the tray down with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry. Someone bumped me. I didn't..." He looked down at the spreading stain, then up at her. Their eyes met. She braced for anger, dismissal, the cold fury rich people reserved for the help who ruined their things. Instead, he smiled. "Well," he said, voice warm with amusement. "That's one way to make an impression." Heat flooded her face. "I'll pay for the cleaning, I can—" "You'll do no such thing." He plucked the soaked jacket off, revealing a shirt that clung to broad shoulders. "Accidents happen, though I have to say, you've given me the perfect excuse to leave early." He extended his hand. "Garrison Holloway." She stared at his hand like it might bite her. "I know who you are. Everyone knows who you are." "Then you have me at a disadvantage." His hand stayed extended, patient. "Valentina Cruz." She shook it, his palm warm and firm against hers. "I'm the volunteer coordinator, and I just ruined your suit. This is the worst first impression I've ever made." "Is it?" His thumb brushed across her knuckles before releasing her hand. A touch that lasted a second too long to be accidental. "Because, from where I'm standing, you're the first honest moment I've had all evening. Everyone else has been telling me what they think I want to hear. You just told the truth." Something in his gaze made her skin hum. Not just attraction, though God, he was attractive, but the way he focused on her, like the ballroom full of important people had faded to background noise. "Let me buy you a drink," he said, "to make up for ruining my suit." She blinked. "That's backwards. I ruined your suit." "Then let me buy you a drink to give you a chance to apologize properly." His smile turned playful, devastating. "I'm not taking no for an answer, Valentina Cruz." Her name in his mouth felt intimate, dangerous. "I'm working," she protested weakly. "For how much longer?" "Another hour. I'll wait." And he did. She felt his eyes on her throughout the rest of the evening, tracking her movements as she coordinated volunteers and ensured guests had what they needed. Every time she glanced his way, he was watching. Not creepy, interested, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. When her shift ended, he materialized beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "I believe I owe you this." They found a quiet corner away from the main event, and Valentina, who'd spent the evening feeling invisible, suddenly felt seen in a way that terrified and thrilled her. "I don't belong here," she admitted, gesturing at the opulence around them. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "This borrowed dress, these people, I'm just the help tonight." "Neither do I," he replied, eyes locked on hers. "I just learned to pretend better." "You're a billionaire," she laughed. "You literally belong everywhere. Money doesn't buy belonging. It buys access." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cleveland with parents who worked 3 jobs between them. I remember eating cereal for dinner and wearing my cousin's hand-me-downs. All this?" He gestured at the ballroom. "I learned the language, but it's not my native tongue." The confession cracked something open in her chest. She'd expected arrogance, distance, not recognition. They talked for an hour, then 2, about her work with families struggling to keep roofs over their heads, kids who needed advocates, systems that failed people who couldn't afford lawyers. About his climb from middle-class nothing to tech empire. The pressure of maintaining what he'd built, the loneliness of success. "Everyone wants something from me," he said quietly. "A donation, an introduction, a piece of whatever I've built. But you didn't even know who I was when you spilled champagne on me." "I knew," she corrected. "I just didn't care about your money. I cared that I'd ruined your night." His expression shifted, softened. You didn't ruin anything. You saved it. The air between them thickened, charged. His hand rested on the small of her back as he guided her away from the dispersing crowd. Warm, possessive, making her skin hum with awareness she hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. "Let me buy you a drink to make up for ruining my suit," he murmured, his breath tickling her ear. The suggestion in his voice had nothing to do with champagne. They ended up in the parking garage 3 hours after her shift ended, standing beside her 10-year-old Honda that looked ridiculous next to the Maseratis and Teslas filling the lot. The overhead lights buzzed, harsh and unflattering, stripping away the ballroom's magic. He didn't seem to notice or care. "Can I take you to dinner?" he asked. "Not somewhere like this. Somewhere real." She should have said no. Should have recognized the danger in a man this wealthy, this interested, this fast. But all she felt was wanted in a way that made her forget every reason to be careful. "Okay," she whispered. He pulled out his phone. "What's your number?" She rattled it off, watching him type it in. He asked about her schedule, her favorite foods, what neighborhood she lived in, her dreams. And she answered, caught in the gravity of his attention, not noticing how thoroughly he'd studied her in just one evening, not noticing how quickly he'd learned everything about her, not noticing the difference between interest and investigation. When he finally let her drive away, she caught his reflection in her rearview mirror. Standing under those harsh lights, watching her go, his expression unreadable. She felt like Cinderella leaving the ball. She didn't feel like prey. Not yet. Have you ever met someone who made you feel seen for the first time? That moment when attraction isn't just physical, but feels like recognition? Tell me in the comments about the moment you knew someone was different. He called it romance. Her brother called it a red flag. She called it love. The flowers arrived the next morning. 24 white roses with a card in bold handwriting. "For the woman who made champagne look good on me. Dinner Friday? G." Valentina stood in her tiny apartment kitchen, staring at roses that cost more than her weekly grocery budget, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. Friday became Saturday brunch, became Sunday afternoon in Central Park. Garrison moved through her life like weather, sudden, consuming, impossible to ignore. He texted good morning before she woke up, called during her lunch breaks just to hear her voice, showed up at her community center with coffee and genuine interest in the family she served. "You really care about this work," he observed, watching her navigate a crisis with a single mother facing eviction. "These families don't have safety nets," she explained. "One bad month, one medical bill, and everything falls apart. I'm sometimes the only person standing between them in the street." His expression shifted, respect mixing with something else. Want. "You're extraordinary." She wasn't used to being extraordinary. Competent, sure, reliable, but not remarkable. 6 weeks in, he invited her to his Connecticut estate for the weekend. Damon called 30 minutes before she left. "Val, slow down. I'm just going for the weekend." "You met him 6 weeks ago," her brother interrupted. "And you're already spending every free moment with him. When's the last time you saw your friends?" She paused, keys in hand. "I've been busy. Busy with him." Damon's voice carried that FBI tone, the one that meant he was gathering evidence. "I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm saying 6 weeks isn't long enough to know if he's a good one. You're being overprotective. I'm being your brother." He sighed. "Just pay attention, okay? To how he treats people when you're not looking. to whether he respects your boundaries, to whether you're changing yourself to fit his world. "I'm not changing anything," she protested. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. She'd started dressing differently, saying yes to things she didn't want, canceling plans when he called. "If you say so," Damon replied, not believing her. "Just remember, men like him don't just hand out chances, they make investments." The words followed her to Connecticut. The estate sprawled across 10 acres of manicured hills, all stone and glass and deliberate perfection. Standing in the master bedroom that overlooked infinity pools and sculptures, Valentina felt the ground shift beneath her. This could be her life if she just said yes to everything he offered. "What do you think?" Garrison came up behind her, hands settling on her waist. "I think I'm out of my depth," she admitted. He turned her to face him. "You're exactly where you belong?" That night, they had dinner on the terrace, overlooking grounds lit like a movie set. Wine older than she was. Food prepared by his personal chef. Conversation that felt easy despite the absurdity of the setting. "Tell me something true," he said, refilling her wine glass. "Something you don't tell everyone." She hesitated, then took the leap. "I'm scared this is a dream, that I'll wake up and you'll realize I'm just ordinary." "You're not ordinary." His hand covered hers on the table. "You're the first real thing I've found in years." The words wrapped around her like silk, soft, binding. Later, in his bedroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds, he undressed her slowly against the glass, moonlight painting her skin silver. "I want to know every inch of you," he whispered, trailing kisses down her throat. She surrendered to his touch, to the luxury, to the fantasy of being chosen by someone so powerful. His hands moved with practiced confidence, positioning her exactly where he wanted, guiding her responses. When she reached for him, he caught her wrists gently. "Let me," he murmured. "Let me take care of you." It felt romantic, generous, like he was giving her something precious. She didn't notice how he controlled every movement, every gasp, how her pleasure came only when she followed his lead, how even in intimacy, he was directing the scene. She only noticed how wanted she felt, how special. Afterward, wrapped in sheets that cost more than her monthly rent, she felt like she'd stepped into a different life. One where she wasn't struggling, wasn't tired, wasn't ordinary. "Stay," he whispered into her hair. "Move in with me." Her heart stuttered. "Garrison, we've known each other 6 weeks. I know what I want." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an intensity that made breathing difficult. "I want you. Here. With me. Why wait when we both know this is right? I need to think." "Of course." But his expression shuddered slightly, hurt flashing across his features. "Take your time." The morning after, she found him in his home office on a call, his voice sharp and cold in a way she'd never heard. "I don't care what it costs. Make it happen, or you're done." The words cracked like a whip. When he noticed her in the doorway, his expression transformed instantly back to warmth. "Morning, beautiful." But for just a second, she'd glimpsed something else beneath the charm. Something hard, unyielding. "Everything okay?" she asked carefully. "Just business." He crossed to her, kissing her forehead. "Nothing for you to worry about." The dismissal was gentle, absolute. On the drive back to the city, her phone buzzed with messages from friends she'd been neglecting, coffee dates she'd canceled, plans she'd rescheduled. They all said versions of the same thing. "We miss you. When can we see you?" She responded with apologies and vague promises, already calculating when Garrison would be free, already rearranging her life around his. Damon met her for coffee that Tuesday. How was Connecticut? Beautiful, she said, smiling. And what? You're moving too fast, Val. He set down his cup, law enforcement eyes reading her like evidence. You met him 6 weeks ago. Now you're spending weekends at his estate? Or maybe I've been moving too slow my whole life, she shot back, defensive. Not everyone gets this chance. A man like him interested in someone like me. Someone like you? Damon's voice hardened. You mean someone smart, compassionate, and worth 10 of him? Val, you're not some charity case. Don't let him make you feel grateful for basic attention. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're disappearing into his world. When's the last time you saw your friends without canceling? When's the last time you made a decision without checking if it works for his schedule? The words landed like punches because they were true. That's what worries me, her brother said quietly. Men like him don't just hand out chances, they make investments. And I'm watching him invest in controlling every aspect of your life. She stood up, anger and shame warring in her chest. You don't know him. Neither do you, not really. 6 weeks isn't enough time. But 6 weeks with Garrison felt like 6 months. 6 years. Like she'd known him forever and was just now finding her way home. She left the coffee shop furious with Damon for not understanding, and terrified he might be right. When does passion cross the line into possession? Have you ever ignored warning signs from people who loved you because the romance felt too good to question? Share your experience below. 3 months after they met, he asked her to marry him. 6 weeks later, she understood what she'd really agreed to. The engagement ring caught light like a warning signal. 8 carats of flawless diamond that weighed heavy on her finger. Beautiful, expensive, and impossible to ignore. Just like the man who'd placed it there with a crowd of Boston's elite watching and applauding. He'd brought her back to the same charity gala where they met. Same ballroom, same chandeliers. Except this time, she wasn't wearing a borrowed dress or carrying champagne for guests. She was wearing designer silk he'd bought her and standing on a stage while Garrison dropped to one knee in front of 500 people. Valentina Cruz, he said, voice carrying across the hushed room. You're the most real thing in my life. Marry me. Build an empire with me. Let me spend forever making you happy. Every woman in the room sighed. Phones appeared, recording. The moment felt like a movie. She should have noticed the crowd, the cameras, the public pressure making no impossible. She should have noticed he'd never asked her in private, never given her space to think. She should have noticed this wasn't a question. It was a performance. But all she saw was the man she loved, offering her a fairy tale. Yes, she whispered. The ballroom erupted. He slid the ring onto her finger, too tight. She'd notice later. And kissed her while flashbulbs exploded around them. That night, they barely made it back to his penthouse suite before he had her against the door, desperate and claiming. Say it again, he demanded between kisses, hands already working the zipper of her dress. Say you're mine. I'm yours, she breathed, wanting him, wanting this, wanting the fantasy to be real. He took her there against the door, rough and possessive, murmuring mine like a prayer against her skin. And she surrendered to it, to him, not yet understanding the difference between being chosen and being owned. Wedding planning started the next day. I'm thinking June, he announced over breakfast, scrolling through his phone. The Connecticut estate, 300 guests. I've already contacted the best wedding planner in New York. Valentina looked up from her coffee. Don't I get a say? Of course. He smiled, but his eyes stayed on his screen. What were you thinking? Something smaller, more intimate. Maybe my mother could help plan. Your mother? He finally looked at her. Baby, she's lovely, but this needs to be perfect, professional. Trust me. The trust me felt like a door closing. Over the next weeks, she learned what trust me actually meant. She got to pick between options he'd already approved. Flowers in white or ivory. Menu selection between chicken or fish. Guest list that included his colleagues, his clients, his friends, and a small corner table for hers. I want to keep working at the community center, she announced one morning during a wedding planning session. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. Why would you need to work? Because it matters to me. Because those families need... I need you, he interrupted, voice hardening. Isn't that enough? Val, I'm building something here. I need a wife who can travel with me, host events, be available, not someone rushing off to handle other people's problems. Those people are my life. I'm your life now. The words landed cold, final. They stared at each other across expensive plates and designer coffee cups. Something shifted between them, subtle but seismic. We'll discuss it later, he said, picking up his fork. When you're less emotional. The dismissal stung worse than outright refusal. He'd turned her career, her purpose, into emotions he could wave away. But he apologized that night with roses and promises. I'm sorry. I'm under a lot of stress with a merger. I just want you happy and safe. Is that so wrong? It wasn't wrong. It was careful, calculated, control disguised as care. The prenup arrived 6 weeks before the wedding. It's standard, his lawyer explained, sliding documents across the conference table. In the event of divorce, assets acquired before marriage remain separate. You'd receive a settlement based on length of marriage, with stipulations. What stipulations? Damon asked. He'd insisted on attending, FBI instincts in overdrive. The lawyer cleared his throat. If Mrs. Cruz initiates divorce without documented evidence of abuse, the settlement is significantly reduced. Silence filled the conference room. You're punishing her for leaving? Damon's voice went deadly quiet. We're protecting assets, the lawyer corrected. Standard practice in high net worth marriages. Valentina stared at the contract, at clauses that spelled out exactly what she'd get if she dared to walk away. Almost nothing, unless she could prove he'd hurt her badly enough to count. I need time to think, she said. Garrison's hand covered hers. Of course, take all the time you need. But that night, he was distant, hurt. I thought you trusted me. I thought this was forever. It is. Then why does signing a piece of paper matter? It's just a formality, Val. We'll never need it. The guilt ate at her. Here he was, offering her everything, and she was hung up on legal documents. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe this was just how wealthy people protected themselves. She signed it late one night, exhausted from hours of his lawyer's explanations and Garrison's wounded silences. It's just a formality, he assured her, kissing her forehead. We'll never need it. But she noticed he'd already signed days ago. While she agonized, he'd been certain. What would you do if your partner asked you to give up work you love? Is compromise the same as sacrifice? Tell me where you'd draw the line in the comments. She walked down the aisle toward forever. And her brother walked her there, even though every instinct told him to run. White roses covered every surface of the estate, transforming it into a fantasy realm that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. She looked like a princess in French lace and silk, walking toward a man who watched her approach with the intensity of someone acquiring a prized possession. 300 guests filled white chairs arranged across the lawn. String quartet playing music she hadn't chosen, champagne flowing from fountains, every detail perfect, expensive, and orchestrated by people she'd never met. "You can still change your mind," Damon whispered as they stood at the back of the aisle, his arm tense under her hand. "I'm not changing my mind." "Val, don't." She squeezed his arm. "I love him. This is what I want." Damon's jaw worked, then quietly, "If he ever hurts you?" "He won't," she cut him off. "He loves me." "That's what I'm afraid of," her brother whispered. "His kind of love looks a lot like ownership." The music swelled. Guests stood, and Valentina walked toward Garrison, her hand on her brother's arm, feeling him vibrate with warnings he couldn't voice. At the altar, Damon placed her hand in Garrison's. Their eyes met. Her brother's gaze held a promise. "I'll be watching." The ceremony blurred. Vows she didn't write. Rings exchanged. Kiss that drew applause. Then she was married, and somehow it felt like she'd signed something more binding than a marriage license. Garrison's toast at the reception raised champagne glasses across the lawn. "To my wife," he announced, arm around her waist. "The most beautiful woman I've ever known. I'm the luckiest man alive to call you mine. To own this incredible partnership. To finally have everything I've worked for." The guests cheered, but Valentina heard the words he'd actually used. Mine, own, have. Possession, not partnership. She smiled through dinner, through dances, through congratulations from people who didn't know her but knew Garrison's net worth. Their wedding night, he was different. Rougher. "You're my wife now," he growled against her throat, fingers digging into her hips hard enough to bruise. She gasped, pain mixing with pleasure in ways she wasn't ready for. "Garrison, slow down." He did, immediately, but hurt flashed across his face like she'd rejected him completely. "I'm sorry," she whispered, feeling guilty for speaking up. No, I'm sorry." He gentled his touch, kissing her softly. "I got carried away. You're just so beautiful. I've been waiting for this. For you to really be mine." Later, he apologized with champagne and gentle touches, and she told herself every marriage had adjustments. Every couple learned each other's rhythms. This was normal. The bruises on her hips said otherwise, but she told herself they were accidental. Their honeymoon in Bali should have been paradise. Private villa, ocean views, staff who materialized and vanished like ghosts. The first few days were perfect. Then she laughed at something their tour guide said, a harmless joke about newlyweds never leaving their rooms. Back in their villa, Garrison's mood turned glacial. "That was inappropriate," he said quietly, not looking at her. "What was?" "Laughing like that? At a joke about our private life. You embarrassed me." She stared at him. He was just being friendly. He was unprofessional, and you encouraged it. Garrison poured himself a drink, back rigid. "But maybe you enjoyed the attention from another man." "That's not Garrison. He was just making conversation." Silence. He didn't yell, didn't argue, just withdrew. Spent the next 2 days barely speaking to her, his coldness filling the villa like fog. She apologized for laughing, for not realizing, for failing some test she didn't know she was taking. On the third day, he forgave her, kissed her, made love to her gently. I just love you so much, he explained. The thought of you looking at someone else makes me crazy. Can you understand that? She could. Or she told herself she could. That's when she first understood. His love came with terms and conditions she was still learning. Have you ever had someone in your life try to warn you about a relationship and you didn't listen until it was too late? What would you tell your younger self now? Drop your wisdom below. The penthouse had everything except the one thing she needed most: a way out. The Manhattan penthouse stretched across an entire floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of a city she used to love. Now it felt like an aquarium. Beautiful, expensive, and impossible to escape without someone noticing. The first year of marriage, she lost pieces of herself so gradually she didn't notice until they were gone. First, her friends. They don't understand our life, Garrison would say when she made plans. They're jealous. Why do you need them when you have me? Then her job. You don't need to work, he'd insist. Let me take care of you. Isn't that what marriage means? Then her phone. I added a tracking app, he explained, for safety, so I always know you're okay. You don't mind, do you? Each request came wrapped in concern, in love, in care. Each refusal resulted in days of cold silence, hurt looks, withdrawn affection. She learned to say yes. It was easier than fighting. He questioned her clothing. That dress is too revealing. Don't you want to save yourself for me? He monitored her calls. Who were you talking to? Why didn't you mention you'd called Damon? He controlled their finances. Everything's in my name. It's simpler for taxes. Just tell me what you need, and I'll transfer money. Slowly, quietly, he built walls around her life until the penthouse wasn't a home. It was a prison with expensive furniture. I'm going to Philadelphia this weekend to see Damon, she announced at breakfast one Friday, 9 months into their marriage. His newspaper lowered slowly. We have the gala. That's tonight. I'll be back Sunday. I need you here. Garrison, I haven't seen my brother in 2 months. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist tight enough to hurt. I said no. She tried to pull away. He shoved her backward. The chair toppled. She hit the floor, shock stealing her breath. Silence filled the room as they both processed what had just happened. Then he was kneeling beside her, hands shaking. Oh, God. Val, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... You just weren't listening. You shoved me. I know. I'm so sorry. Tears in his eyes. Genuine, terrified. I've been under so much stress. The merger, the board. I'd never hurt you intentionally. You know that, right? She sat on the kitchen floor, wrist throbbing, and wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. I'll start therapy, he promised. I'll fix this. Please don't leave. Please. She didn't leave. She had nowhere to go. No job. No money in her name. No friends she hadn't pushed away. He apologized for hours that day, brought her flowers, promised to change. And she wanted so badly for it to be true that she painted the shove as accidental, painted his control as concern, painted her cage as protection. That's how it starts, one excuse at a time. At night, he used intimacy as both reward and punishment. After arguments, he'd seduce her with practiced skill, making her body respond even when her heart was breaking. See? He'd murmur afterward, hands possessive on her skin. This is what we are. This is real. And she'd lie there wondering why pleasure could feel so much like manipulation, why her body could betray her mind so thoroughly, why she couldn't remember the last time she'd wanted him instead of just giving in. But she stayed. Because leaving felt impossible. Because she'd signed a prenup that punished her for walking away. Because she'd isolated herself so completely that pride wouldn't let her admit failure. Because somewhere deep down, she still loved the man she'd met at that gala. The one who'd seen her. Who'd promised forever. She just couldn't find him anymore beneath the man who tracked her phone and controlled her money and made her feel grateful for basic kindness. How does love turn into control? At what point does protecting become possessing? Have you seen this pattern in someone's relationship? Share your thoughts below. Your comment might help someone recognize what they're living through. The pregnancy test showed positive, and for the first time in months, she felt hope. He felt ownership. 2 pink lines. Valentina stared at the test stick in the penthouse bathroom, hands trembling. 2 years of marriage. 2 years of slowly disappearing into Garrison's world. And now this. A baby. For months, she'd felt hollow. Empty. Like she was going through motions without purpose. But this tiny cluster of cells growing inside her, gave her something Garrison couldn't take away. She walked into his home office where he was reviewing quarterly reports. Garrison? He didn't look up. I'm pregnant. His head snapped up. For a second, his face was unreadable. Then it split into a grin she hadn't seen in months. You're serious? 3 tests, all positive. He crossed the room in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet. We're having a baby. Not asking, stating, claiming. This is perfect. My legacy, our family. The words should have warmed her. Instead, they settled cold in her stomach. My legacy. Not our baby. Not our child. His. But she pushed the thought away. Maybe this would fix them. Maybe becoming parents would soften his edges, remind him why they'd fallen in love. Maybe. The gender reveal party happened at the Connecticut estate. 300 guests. Pink and blue decorations covering every surface. Photographers. Press. The works. When the smoke exploded pink across the lawn, champagne flutes lifted in celebration. A daughter! Someone shouted. Applause thundered. Garrison pulled her close for the cameras, hand possessive on her barely showing belly. My girls, he murmured into her hair. Both of you belong to me now. Valentina stood at the center of it all, hand on her stomach, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like armor. This baby, her daughter, deserved better than what she'd accepted. Better than silence. Better than fear. She just didn't know yet how to give it to her. Her body changed, curves appearing where there'd been angles, breasts heavy and sensitive, belly swelling with new life. And Garrison's obsession grew with every week. He touched her constantly, hands roaming over her changing shape with an intensity that felt suffocating. You're carrying my daughter, he'd say, fingers possessive on her skin. You've never been more beautiful. But she didn't feel beautiful. She felt like a vessel, a container for something he valued more than her, desired for what she carried, not who she was. At night, his hands would map her body like territory he owned. Say it, he'd demand. Say you're mine, both of you. And she would, because resistance cost more than compliance, because her body responded even when her heart pulled away. Because she'd learned that peace was easier than fighting. Doctor's appointments became battlegrounds. I'd like a midwife for the delivery, she mentioned at 16 weeks, sitting in Dr. Patricia Knowles' office. Something more natural. Garrison spoke before she could finish. We'll use the best obstetrician in Manhattan. I've already made arrangements. Dr. Knowles glanced between them. Mrs. Holloway, what would you prefer? I think... She's concerned about the baby's safety. Garrison interrupted smoothly, smile firmly in place. Pregnancy hormones, you understand? Of course, we want the best medical care available. Money's no object. The dismissal stung worse than any shove. He'd reduced her wishes to hormones he could explain away to the doctor, made her sound irrational, over-emotional, not to be trusted with decisions about her own body. Dr. Knowles held her gaze for a long moment. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Concern, definitely. Of course, the doctor said carefully. We'll discuss all options at the next appointment. But they never did. Because Garrison attended every appointment, dominated every conversation, made every decision. And Valentina learned that growing a baby inside her body didn't mean she had control over what happened to it. At 7 months, during a routine ultrasound, Dr. Knowles pulled her aside while Garrison took a call in the hallway. "Are you safe at home?" the doctor asked quietly. Valentina's rehearsed smile faltered. The question landed like a punch. Of course. Because if you need help, there are resources. People who can... I'm fine. The lie came automatically. He's just protective. The pregnancy makes him worry. Dr. Knowles didn't look convinced. She pulled a card from her pocket. My personal cell. If that changes, if you need anything, call me. Anytime, day or night. Valentina took the card with trembling fingers, hiding it in her purse like contraband before Garrison returned. The small piece of cardstock felt heavier than it should. Like possibility, like escape, like proof that someone saw what she'd been hiding. That night, Garrison found her in the nursery they'd decorated. Pink walls, expensive furniture, every detail perfect and chosen by him. You okay? He asked, hands settling on her shoulders from behind. She looked at the crib, at the life they were preparing for, at the cage they were building for their daughter. What if I'm not a good mother? The words escaped before she could stop them. His hands tightened. You'll be perfect. You'll give her everything. You'll teach her to be grateful for what she has, to appreciate the life I've built for you both. Not we've built, not our life, his life, his daughter, his perfect family. And somewhere in there, Valentina existed only as the woman who made it possible. When did you realize that someone's love was really about control? Was there a specific moment that made you see clearly? Tell me your story below. Breaking silence breaks shame. The doctor's note was supposed to protect the baby. Instead, it became the thing that destroyed their marriage. 32 weeks into her pregnancy, Valentina started spotting. Not much, just enough to terrify her. She called Dr. Knowles immediately. The ultrasound showed complications with the placenta. Low-lying, concerning, dangerous if not managed carefully. Dr. Knowles sat across from her and Garrison in the examination room, hands folded on the desk. The baby's fine. Healthy heartbeat, good size. But we need to be very careful for the next 8 weeks. What does that mean? Garrison demanded. Complete pelvic rest. The doctor's voice was firm, professional. No sexual activity until after delivery. The placenta positioning means any pressure could cause bleeding, premature labor, or complications that put both mother and baby at risk. She handed Valentina a note on official letterhead. Clean white paper spelling out terms that felt like a death sentence to their already broken relationship. Complete pelvic rest required due to placental complications. No sexual activity until after delivery to ensure infant safety. Garrison read it. His jaw worked. How long? Minimum 8 weeks. Possibly longer depending on how the placenta moves. 8 weeks. He said it like a prison sentence. It's to protect your daughter, Dr. Knowles said carefully. I understand it's difficult, but the alternative could be catastrophic. The drive home was silent. Garrison's hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Valentina's hand protective on her belly. I'm sorry, she whispered. It's not your fault. But his voice was tight, controlled. The voice he used when he was furious, but trying not to show it. That night, he was distant, polite. He kissed her forehead and said all the right things. The baby comes first. Of course, we'll get through this. But she felt the wall building between them. Brick by brick. Resentment mortared with forced smiles. The medical note sat on their kitchen counter for 3 days. Neither of them moved it. It just existed there. Pristine white paper with Dr. Knowles' signature. A physical reminder that for the first time, there was a boundary he couldn't dismiss as hormones or argue away. This was medical, necessary, non-negotiable, and he hated it. The first week, he tried to be understanding, brought her flowers, made her tea, rubbed her feet without being asked. The second week, the Cold War started. He stopped touching her entirely. No hand on her back, no kisses, no casual affection. He moved through their penthouse like she was furniture, necessary but unremarkable. They slept in separate rooms. His choice, he said. I don't want to accidentally hurt the baby. But she knew the truth. He was punishing her for a boundary she hadn't even set. The doctor had said it. Biology had said it. But he blamed her anyway. She woke one night, 2 weeks into the doctor's order, to find him standing in her doorway, watching her sleep. Garrison? I miss you, he said, voice raw in the darkness. She sat up carefully, belly heavy and awkward. I miss you too. Just a few more weeks. It's always something with you. He stepped into the room. Always a reason you can't give me what I need. That's not fair, isn't it? His laugh was bitter. First you're too tired. Then you're not in the mood. Now it's the doctor's orders. There's always an excuse. Tears burned her eyes. I'm trying to keep our daughters safe. I read the note. His voice went cold. I agreed. What more do you want from me? I want you to stop punishing me for it, she whispered. Silence filled the room, heavy, accusatory. Then he left. Didn't slam the door, didn't yell. Just withdrew. Went back to his room and closed her out completely. The next morning she found him at breakfast, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. Good morning, she tried. Morning. No eye contact. This became their pattern. Polite strangers sharing space. He'd ask about the baby, about her health, never about her feelings, never about them. At 34 weeks, she tried to reach him. Really reach him. We should talk, she said over dinner. Neither of them was eating. About what? About us. About how we're going to handle. There's nothing to handle. He cut her a piece of chicken with surgical precision. You have medical restrictions. I'm respecting them. What else is there to discuss? Garrison, please. You're angry. I'm not angry. But his knuckles were white around the knife. I'm being a good husband, supporting you, protecting our daughter. Isn't that what you wanted? The words were right. The delivery was poison. She gave up trying, retreated into herself, focused on the baby, on getting through each day without breaking, on counting down the weeks until delivery when maybe, things could go back to normal. Except she was starting to realize their normal was the problem. His text came at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the doctor's order. Lee Bernardine, 1 p.m. tomorrow. We need to talk. She stared at the message, at the name of one of Manhattan's most expensive restaurants. At the words, need to talk, that never meant anything good. Her first thought, this is it. He's leaving me. Her second thought, maybe that would be better. Her third thought, I'm 7 months pregnant with nowhere to go. She texted back, okay, and told herself lunch in public was safe. That surrounded by Manhattan's elite in broad daylight, nothing could go wrong. That he wouldn't make a scene where people could see. She couldn't have been more wrong. Have you ever been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries that protect yourself or someone you love? How did you handle someone who treated your needs as rejection? Share below. The restaurant was filled with witnesses, cameras, and the illusion of safety. None of it mattered when his hand connected with her face. Le Bernardin gleamed with white tablecloths and hushed conversations. The kind of establishment where power brokers made deals over Dover's soul and discretion was currency. Valentina arrived 10 minutes early, belly heavy and awkward as she navigated between tables. Garrison was already seated. He didn't stand when she approached. "You're here," he said. Not a greeting, an observation. "You asked me to come." He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat carefully, baby pressing against her ribs. The waiter appeared. Garrison ordered for both of them without asking what she wanted. Salmon for her, steak for him, wine for him, water for her. Control even in this. "How are you feeling?" he asked when the waiter left. "Tired. The baby's I've been thinking." He cut her off. "About us. About this situation." Her stomach dropped. "What situation?" "This distance between us. This rejection." "Garrison, it's not rejection. It's medical." "It feels like rejection." His voice stayed level, controlled, but his eyes were hard. 2 weeks of sleeping in separate rooms. 2 weeks of you treating me like I'm dangerous to you. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? He leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, you found the perfect excuse to push me away. The doctor's note. The baby. Always something between us. Tears pricked her eyes. Around them, conversations continued. Silverware clinked against expensive china. No one noticed the pregnant woman falling apart at table 7. "I'm not pushing you away. I'm trying to protect our daughter." "Are you?" His smile was cruel. "Or are you using her as a shield, as an excuse to avoid being a wife?" The accusation landed like a slap. "That's not fair," she whispered. "None of this is fair." He took a sip of wine. "I've given you everything. This life, this security. I ask for one thing, intimacy with my wife, and you find ways to deny me." The doctor said, "I don't care what the doctor said." His voice rose slightly. Not loud enough to draw attention, just loud enough to make her flinch. "I care that my pregnant wife treats me like a stranger, that every boundary you set pushes me further away, that I'm supposed to just accept being shut out of your life." "Garrison, please." She reached across the table for his hand, voice breaking. "It's just a few more weeks. For our baby. For our daughter." His eyes went flat. That look she'd learned to fear. Then his hand moved. Fast. Vicious. The backhand connected with her cheek in a crack that silenced the entire restaurant. Pain exploded across her face. Her chair tipped. She gasped, hands flying to her belly, terror flooding through her, not for herself, but for the baby. Time stopped. Silverware clattered to expensive china. Conversation stopped mid-word. Every eye in Le Bernardin turned toward them. Valentina sat frozen, cheek burning, belly tight with fear. The room tilted, her ears rang, and all she could think was, "The baby, the baby, the baby, please be okay, please." Then movement in her peripheral vision. A man in a black suit stood from a corner booth. Slowly, deliberately, his movement drew every eye. He crossed the restaurant floor with measured steps, not rushing, not hesitating. Just approaching with the calm of someone who'd seen violence before and knew exactly how to handle it. Garrison looked up, annoyed. Ready to dismiss another concerned citizen. Ready to throw money at the problem and make it disappear. Then he saw the FBI badge in the man's hand. The color drained from his face. "Special Agent in Charge Damon Cruz," her brother said, voice deadly calm. "That's my sister you just assaulted." Garrison's mouth opened. Closed. No words came out. Phones appeared around the restaurant. Recording, capturing, preserving. Damon didn't look at the phones. Didn't acknowledge the audience. His eyes stayed locked on Garrison with the focus of a predator who just spotted prey. "Stand up," Damon said. "Slowly, now." And Garrison, the man who'd controlled every aspect of Valentina's life for 5 years, obeyed without question. Because real power doesn't come from money. It comes from truth. Would you intervene if you witnessed this? Would you record it? Call police? Stand frozen? There's no wrong answer, just honest ones. Tell me what you'd do in the comments. Let's talk about what courage really looks like. Money can buy lawyers, mansions, and silence. But it can't stop security cameras or 50 witnesses with cell phones. Garrison stood slowly, hands slightly raised. The gesture looked like compliance, but Valentina saw the calculation in his eyes, already planning his defense, his escape, his version of events. Damon pulled out handcuffs. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "This is a misunderstanding," Garrison started. "You assaulted a pregnant woman in front of 50 witnesses." Damon's voice never rose, never wavered. "Turn around." The restaurant manager appeared nervous and sweating. "Agent Cruz, perhaps we could handle this more privately." "No." Damon didn't look at him. "This is a crime scene. I need security footage from the past hour. All angles." "Of course, right away." The manager scurried off. Garrison's face went from pale to gray. "You have cameras?" he asked, voice cracking. "Every table," the manager called back. "Insurance purposes." The handcuffs clicked around Garrison's wrists. The sound echoed through the silent restaurant like a gavel. Valentina sat frozen in her chair, hands still on her belly, watching her husband, the most powerful man she knew, get reduced to a suspect in designer handcuffs. Damon knelt beside her. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" His voice was gentle. The brother she remembered before Garrison had isolated her. Before she'd stopped calling, before she disappeared into a marriage that had slowly suffocated her. She shook her head, tears streaming. "The baby." "We'll get you checked out," he promised. Then, rising, facing Garrison, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The Miranda rights sounded surreal in the fancy restaurant. Wrong, like they belonged on a TV show, not in her life. Uniformed officers arrived. NYPD. 2 of them responding to Damon's call. "Assault and battery," Damon told them. "Multiple witnesses, security footage. Victim is 7 months pregnant." One officer whistled low. "Man, you really stepped in it." Garrison tried his boardroom voice. "This is a private matter between my wife and me." "Not anymore." Damon cut him off. You committed assault and battery in front of 50 witnesses with multiple video recordings. Your wealth doesn't buy immunity from the law. I want my lawyer. You'll get your phone call at the station." Damon nodded to the officers. "Take him." As they led Garrison toward the exit, he caught Valentina's eyes across the restaurant. For just a second, she saw past his rage to something else. Fear of losing control, losing his empire, losing the narrative, losing the carefully constructed image he'd spent years building. Then he was gone, let out in handcuffs while phones captured every moment, while Manhattan's elite whispered and stared, while his reputation crumbled in real time. The restaurant transformed into a crime scene, diners becoming witnesses, expensive meals abandoned as police collected statements. "I saw it happen," one woman told an officer. "He hit her hard. She's pregnant. I couldn't believe it." "Completely unprovoked," a businessman added. "She was trying to hold his hand. He just snapped." Their stories wove together, consistent, damning, impossible to deny. Valentina sat at the table, surrounded by strangers' sympathy, and felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, not relief, grief, for what she'd thought they were, for the man she'd met at that gala 5 years ago, for the fairy tale that had turned into a nightmare she'd been too ashamed to admit. Damon helped her to her feet. "Come on, let's get you to a doctor." "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now?" He guided her toward the exit, one hand protective on her back. "Now the system does its job, and you decide what you want to do next." Outside, news vans were already arriving. Someone had tipped them off. Or maybe the viral videos beating them there. Because everyone in that restaurant had recorded it. Everyone had posted it. And within an hour, the video of billionaire Garrison Holloway striking his pregnant wife would have 50 million views and climbing. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy back 50 cell phone videos showing the truth. Justice in real time. How does it feel watching someone who seemed untouchable face consequences? Have you witnessed someone powerful finally being held accountable? Tell me your story below. The doctor confirmed the baby was fine. Now Valentina had to decide if she was. The hospital room was sterile and quiet, so different from the luxury she'd lived in for 5 years. No designer anything, no views of Manhattan's skyline. Just clean white walls and the steady beep of fetal monitors confirming her daughter was safe. Dr. Knowles examined her thoroughly, checked the baby's heartbeat, looked for signs of premature labor, took her blood pressure 3 times because it kept climbing. "The baby's fine," the doctor finally said. "Healthy heartbeat, no signs of distress. But Valentina, your blood pressure is dangerously high. You're at risk for preeclampsia." "What does that mean?" "It means stress is putting you and the baby in danger." Dr. Knowles pulled up a chair, sitting eye level with her. "Where are you staying tonight?" I don't know." "She's staying with me," Damon said from the doorway. He'd been making calls, coordinating with his FBI colleagues, ensuring Garrison stayed locked up. Dr. Knowles nodded. "Good. You need rest, peace, no stress. Can you do that?" Valentina almost laughed. No stress. After her husband had just been arrested for hitting her in public. After her entire life had imploded in one afternoon. "I'll try," she whispered. A courier arrived before they could leave. Envelope marked urgent. Legal documents inside. Garrison's settlement offer. Her hands shook as she read. Generous divorce terms. Full child custody. Trust fund for the baby worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. In exchange for one thing, an NDA about the abuse. Non-disclosure agreement. Silence in exchange for money. This is hush money, Damon said flatly, reading over her shoulder. My lawyer called it a gift, Valentina replied. A way to protect my daughter's future, to avoid a messy trial. It's a bribe. He took the papers from her hands. He's buying your silence, paying you to let him do this to the next woman. The words hit like ice water, because there would be a next woman. There always was with men like Garrison. Another woman he'd charm, control, isolate, break, unless someone stopped him. I need to think, she said. Damon drove her to his apartment in Queens, modest compared to the penthouse. 2 bedrooms, lived-in furniture, coffee rings on the table, photos of family on every surface, real, messy, honest. Everything her marriage hadn't been. She sat on his couch, surrounded by legal documents, each path forward clearly mapped, but neither feeling right. I ignored everything, she told Damon that night, voice breaking. The way he isolated me from friends, how he made every argument about my failure to appreciate him, the financial control, the tracking, the mood swings. She listed them like evidence, red flags she'd painted green through sheer force of will. Why didn't I see it? Because he was good at hiding it, her brother said gently. Abusers are. They don't start with slaps. They start with compliments that become criticisms, love that becomes control. You're not stupid, you're human. She touched her still burning cheek and realized something profound. She couldn't remember the last time Garrison had touched her with genuine tenderness. Even their intimacy had become transactional. His need, her accommodation, his control. She'd spent years performing desire she didn't feel. And now, in Damon's spare bedroom with the door locked, her body finally relaxed without his presence. For the first time in years, she slept without fear of his mood determining her morning. She wore comfortable clothes without calculating his reaction. She ate what she wanted, spoke to whom she pleased, moved through space without performing. Her body, so long treated as his property, began remembering it belonged to her. The next morning, Damon slid a file across the table. There were others, he said carefully. Valentina opened it. 3 women from Garrison's company who'd filed HR complaints. Sexual harassment, hostile work environment, all settled quietly with NDAs. Her hands shook as she read their stories. Different details, same pattern, charm, control, cruelty. He made me feel like I was the problem, one woman wrote. Like if I just tried harder, dressed differently, stopped being so emotional, he wouldn't have to get angry. Valentina closed her eyes. He said the same things to me. That's what abusers do, Damon said gently. Make you responsible for their behavior. She looked at the settlement offer, at the money, at the easy exit, then at the file of women who'd been silenced by similar offers. If I take the settlement, it's over, she said. I get money, custody, freedom. And he gets to do it again, Damon replied, to whoever comes next. She closed her eyes, one hand on her belly. What if this destroys me? What if I lose? What if you win? Her brother met her gaze. Not just in court. What if you teach your daughter that some things matter more than safety? The question hung between them, and Valentina realized her daughter would one day ask what she did, how she responded, whether she chose silence or truth. What answer did she want to give? To anyone reading this who's listing red flags, they ignored. You're not alone. You're not stupid. And recognizing the pattern is the first step to breaking it. What would you tell someone currently living what Valentina lived? Share your strength below. She could walk away quietly with money and safety, or she could speak loudly and risk everything. The choice should have been obvious. It wasn't. Damon's apartment in Queens felt smaller with all the legal documents spread across the coffee table. Everything her marriage hadn't been lived in this space. Real furniture with scratches, coffee rings nobody bothered to hide. Family photos covering walls instead of expensive art. Valentina sat cross-legged on the floor, belly pressing against her thighs, sorting through two different futures. Her lawyer had called that morning. "The settlement is generous," he'd said. "Professional. Detached. Full custody, trust fund, divorce terms that set you up comfortably. You'd never have to worry about money again." What's the catch? NDA, non-disclosure agreement. You can't talk about the abuse publicly, can't give interviews, can't write a book. Essentially, you agree to silence in exchange for security. She'd hung up and stared at the documents for an hour. The video had gone viral. 50 million views in 48 hours. Comment sections exploding with opinions from people who'd never met her, never lived her life, never felt trapped in a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. Half the comments supported her, called Garrison a monster, demanded justice. The other half tore her apart. Gold digger. She trapped him with a baby. Probably provoked him for months. Why'd she stay if it was so bad? The lies hurt worse than the slap, because people believed them. Garrison's PR team worked overtime painting her as manipulative, him as a stressed executive who'd snapped once under pressure. "She's been difficult throughout the pregnancy," an anonymous source told tabloids. "Emotional, demanding. He's been trying so hard to be patient." Reading those words felt like drowning. Then the other women started coming forward. First, the three from his company, the ones with HR complaints and sealed NDAs. Their lawyers contacted Valentina's team. "Our clients are willing to testify. If she's pressing charges, they want to help." Then three more, women who dated Garrison before Valentina. Different years, same story. "He was perfect at first," one wrote in an email Damon showed her. "Flowers, attention, made me feel special. Then he started tracking my phone, questioning my friends, getting angry when I didn't text back fast enough. I left before it got physical. But I always wondered if I was the problem." Valentina's hands shook reading their stories. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't about her failing as a wife. This was about him. His need to control, his inability to see women as people instead of possessions. "There were others," Damon said carefully, sliding a file across the table. "3 women from his company who filed HR complaints. Sexual harassment. Hostile work environment, all settled quietly with NDAs." She opened the file, read their accounts, saw herself reflected in every word. "He made me feel like I was the problem," one woman had written. "Like if I just tried harder, dressed differently, stopped being so emotional, he wouldn't have to get angry." The exact words Garrison had used on her. For the first time in years, Valentina slept without fear of his mood determining her morning. In Damon's spare bedroom with the door locked, she wore sweatpants and ate ice cream at midnight and spoke to her old friends without asking permission. Her body, so long treated as his property, began remembering it belonged to her. "If I take the settlement, it's over," she said to Damon that night. "I get money, custody, freedom. I can raise Sophia in peace." "And he gets to do it again," Damon replied quietly. "To whoever comes next." She closed her eyes, one hand on her belly where Sophia kicked and rolled, unaware of the choice her mother was making. "What if this destroys me? What if I press charges and lose? What if the jury believes his lawyers instead of me? What if you win? Her brother leaned forward, not just in court. What if you teach your daughter that some things matter more than safety? That speaking truth matters even when it's hard? The question hung between them. Valentina thought about Sophia, about the woman her daughter would become, about the day, years from now, when Sophia would ask what happened between her parents. What answer did she want to give? I took the money and stayed quiet, or I fought back even though I was scared. She called the prosecutor at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, Sophia pressing against her ribs like she was listening too. I'm pressing charges, Valentina said, voice steady despite shaking hands. All of them, assault, battery, everything the law allows, and I'm not signing any NDA. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that she wondered if they'd been disconnected. Then, are you sure? This will get ugly. His lawyers will attack your character. The media will tear you apart. It could take months, maybe years. Valentina looked at her reflection in the darkened window. Swollen face from the slap. Pregnant belly, eyes that looked clearer than they had in years. I'm sure. Let it get ugly. The truth usually is. When is the right time to choose yourself over safety? Is there one? Or is safety the ultimate form of self-care? This isn't a simple question. Tell me your truth in the comments. There's wisdom in every answer. Going public was supposed to be empowering. Nobody warned her it would feel like dying. The street outside Damon's building transformed overnight. News vans with satellite dishes, photographers with long lenses, reporters shouting questions whenever she appeared. Her private nightmare had become public entertainment, dissected by millions who knew nothing about her except 50 seconds of violence. Mrs. Holloway, is it true you're seeking $50 million in the divorce? Valentina, did you provoke him? How do you respond to allegations you trapped him with the pregnancy? She learned to keep her head down, to ignore the questions, to let Damon guide her through the crowd with his FBI badge clearing paths. But she couldn't escape what they wrote about her. Gold digger looking for a payout, read one headline. Billionaire's wife cries abuse after years of luxury lifestyle, claimed another. Sources say she was emotionally unstable throughout pregnancy, making impossible demands. The lies multiplied faster than truth could catch them. Garrison's PR team worked around the clock, spinning narratives that made him the victim. A stressed executive who'd snapped once under pressure from a difficult wife. Anonymous sources, his friends, his colleagues, people who'd attended their parties, told reporters she'd always been high maintenance, that she'd changed after getting pregnant, that he'd tried so hard to be patient with her mood swings. Reading those words felt like being slapped again, and again, and again. Strangers online debated everything from her appearance to her sexual choices, made judgments about intimacy they knew nothing about, accused her of lying, scheming, manipulating. But in Damon's spare bedroom with the door locked, she reclaimed something precious. Her body belonged to her again. She chose when to sleep, what to wear, how to move through space without performing for someone else's approval. Small freedoms that felt revolutionary after years of control. Then the tide started turning. The other women came forward publicly. 6 of them. Different years. Different circumstances. Same pattern. One posted a video on social media. I dated Garrison Holloway 3 years before he met Valentina. He was charming, generous, perfect, until I wanted to spend time with my friends without him. Then he was cold, controlling, angry. I left before it got physical. But watching that restaurant video, I saw the same man who told me I was too sensitive when I complained about his jealousy. Another wrote an op-ed. I worked at his company for 6 months. He made comments about my body, touched my lower back in meetings. When I reported it to HR, they offered me money to sign an NDA and leave quietly. I took it because I needed my career, but I've regretted that silence ever since. Their stories wove together into something undeniable. This wasn't about one bad moment. This was a pattern of behavior spanning years. Domestic violence organizations reached out, offered support, asked if she'd speak at events once the trial ended. "Your story matters," one director told her over the phone. "Women see themselves in you. If you can speak up, they can too." The weight of that responsibility felt crushing and empowering at once. But the attacks didn't stop. Garrison supporters, and there were many, sent death threats. Emails calling her every name in existence. Messages saying she deserved worse than a slap. Damon's FBI connections kept her safe. Monitored threats ensured nobody could actually reach her. But the words still landed, still hurt. "Why do they hate me?" she asked Damon one night, crying over another batch of vicious comments. "I didn't do anything except tell the truth." "Because the truth threatens them," her brother replied. "If they admit you're a victim, they have to admit their own wives, sisters, daughters could be too. It's easier to blame you than face the reality that men they respect could be abusers." Then new footage surfaced. Security video from their apartment building, 6 months old, showing Garrison shoving her against their penthouse door, her stumbling, him storming away. The doorman came forward with testimony. "I asked if she was okay. She said she fell. But I saw what I saw. He pushed her, hard, and she lied to protect him." Suddenly, the restaurant wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, documented, undeniable, and patterns are prosecutable. Public opinion shifted. Not completely. There were still people who defend Garrison no matter what evidence appeared. But enough shifted that she started seeing comments like, "I believed the PR spin. Then I saw that building footage. This man is dangerous." How many times did he hit her when cameras weren't watching? She's been protecting him for years. That's what abuse does. Valentina read those comments and cried. Not from pain, from relief, from being believed by strangers when she'd spent years not believing herself. Have you ever been blamed for someone else's abuse? Told you caused their anger, deserved their violence, brought it on yourself? The internet is full of people who will believe anything except that powerful men can be monsters. Share your experience of being doubted below. Let's fill this space with belief instead of shame. In court, money buys the best lawyers, but it can't buy back credibility once security footage plays on repeat. The courtroom was smaller than Valentina expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches where reporters and domestic violence advocates filled every seat. No crystal chandeliers, no designer anything. Just the bare truth, stripped of pretense. She sat at the prosecutor's table, 8 months pregnant now, belly pressing against her ribs with every breath. Across the aisle, Garrison sat with 3 expensive lawyers, looking smaller than she remembered, less powerful. Just a man facing consequences he'd thought money could prevent. The preliminary hearing started with Garrison's lawyer requesting bail reduction. "My client is a respected businessman," the lawyer argued. "CEO of a major tech company. He has ties to the community, no prior criminal record, and poses no flight risk." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the defendant committed assault and battery against his pregnant wife in a public restaurant." We have video evidence from multiple angles, 50 eyewitnesses, and testimony from the victim. Additionally, we've uncovered a pattern of abusive behavior toward other women in his professional and personal life. He's a danger to the community. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, reviewed the file. Bail remains at $500,000. Defendant will wear an ankle monitor and maintain distance from the victim per the restraining order. Motion denied. Garrison's face went pale. His lawyers whispered urgently, but the decision stood. Then the real trial began. The prosecutor presented evidence methodically. Restaurant video from every angle, the sound of his hand hitting her face echoing through the courtroom. Jury members flinched. One woman wiped tears. Medical records showing her injuries. Testimony from Dr. Knowles about the medical orders Garrison had resented. Witness statements from the restaurant. The building security footage showing previous incidents. Each piece of evidence built a case that was impossible to deny. Garrison's defense team argued stress, merger pressure, character witnesses talking about his charitable donations and business success. Mr. Holloway has given millions to children's hospitals, one witness testified. He's a pillar of the community. The prosecutor's response was swift. Charles Manson had followers who loved him. Jeffrey Epstein donated to universities. Charitable giving doesn't erase abuse. It just makes it easier to hide. Then came Valentina's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand, hand on her belly, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. And for the first time in 5 years, she did. "Tell us about your marriage," the prosecutor said gently. Valentina took a breath, looked at the jury. 7 women, 5 men, all watching with varying degrees of sympathy and skepticism. "It started perfect," she began. "He was charming, generous, made me feel seen. But after we got engaged, things changed. He started questioning where I went, who I talked to, what I wore. He isolated me from friends, controlled our finances, tracked my phone. Did you ever try to leave? I thought about it. But the prenup meant I'd walk away with almost nothing. I had no money in my name, no job. He'd made sure I was completely dependent on him." "Tell us about your pregnancy." Valentina's voice didn't shake. "He was possessive before. But after I got pregnant, it got worse. He viewed the baby as his property, made all medical decisions without asking me. When my doctor ordered no intimacy due to complications, he punished me for it." The prosecutor paused. "How did he punish you?" "Silent treatment, sleeping in separate rooms, blaming me for having boundaries that protected our daughter's life, making me feel guilty for following doctor's orders. And the day of the assault at Le Bernardin." Valentina closed her eyes. Remembered. He'd been cold for 2 weeks, barely speaking. Then he texted asking me to meet him for lunch. I thought we'd talk, work things out. Instead, he accused me of rejecting him, of using the pregnancy as an excuse. I tried to hold his hand, tried to explain again. And he hit me. The courtroom went silent. "What did you think in that moment?" the prosecutor asked softly. "I thought about the baby, about whether she was okay, about how I'd spent 5 years making excuses for him, and this was what I'd get in return." Then came cross-examination. Garrison's lawyer stood. Expensive suit, practiced smile, ready to attack. "Mrs. Holloway, you enjoyed the lifestyle his money provided, didn't you?" She met his eyes. "I enjoyed believing he loved me. The money was never the point. But you're seeking substantial alimony in the divorce. I'm seeking safety. For myself and our daughter. That shouldn't have a price tag. Isn't it true you provoked these arguments? That you withheld affection deliberately? I followed medical orders to protect my baby's life. If that's provocation, then every pregnant woman following her doctor's advice is guilty. The lawyer tried different angles, questioned her credibility, suggested she was exaggerating. But every time, Valentina answered with calm truth that cut through his tactics. Then they played the restaurant video again, every angle, every second. The sound of his hand hitting her face echoed through the room. Valentina watched Garrison watch himself, saw the moment he could no longer pretend it didn't happen, could no longer spin it as something she'd caused or exaggerated. The truth was on video, undeniable, eternal. As court adjourned for the day, Valentina felt wetness between her legs. Not tears, water. "Damon," she whispered, "my water just broke." Across the courtroom, Garrison half stood, concern flickering across his face. Genuine or performed, she no longer cared. This moment was hers, her daughter's, and no one else's. How many women have sat where Valentina sat? Telling truth to people who'd rather believe the charming man than the hysterical victim. How many never make it to court because the weight of proof feels impossible? If you've told your truth and been doubted, comment below. You're believed here. She brought her daughter into the world surrounded by love, not the man who claimed ownership of them both. The ambulance ride to the hospital blurred. Sirens, pain, Damon's hand gripping hers. Reporters scrambling to follow, cameras capturing her labor like public property. The delivery room blazed with harsh light and urgent voices. Nothing like the birth plan Garrison had insisted on. Private suite, personal chef, photographer for social media announcements. Instead, she labored in a standard hospital room with Damon holding her hand and Dr. Knowles coaching her through contractions. And it felt more right than anything in her marriage ever had. "You're doing great," Dr. Knowles encouraged. "Just a little more." Pain ripped through her, but it was honest pain, purposeful, bringing life instead of taking dignity. "She's crowning," the doctor announced. "One more push, Valentina." She bore down with everything she had, every ounce of strength she'd found to leave, to press charges, to fight. One final push. Then suddenly there was crying. Beautiful, furious, announcing Sophia Grace Holloway's arrival into a world that would know her mother's courage. They placed her on Valentina's chest, slippery, perfect, eyes squeezed shut against the light. Valentina wept. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to her daughter. "I almost let him teach you that love looks like control. But not anymore. Never you." Sophia's tiny hand curled around her finger, holding on, trusting. In that moment, Valentina understood. This was why she'd fought. Not for herself, though she deserved safety. Not for the other women, though they deserved justice. For this. For Sophia. So her daughter would grow up knowing love didn't hurt, knowing boundaries were respected, knowing her mother chose courage over comfort. Garrison's lawyers had requested he be allowed at the birth. The judge denied it based on the restraining order and pending charges. His request for immediate visitation was also denied. Supervised visitation only. The judge ruled via phone from the courthouse. Pending trial outcome and completion of mandated therapy, the safety of the child takes precedence over parental rights. Damon relayed the news. Valentina just nodded. Too exhausted and overwhelmed to feel anything except relief. For once, Garrison's money couldn't buy him access to what he wanted most. Damon met her eyes as she cradled Sophia, both of them exhausted. "You did it. You're safe now." We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have without you. Yeah, you could have, he said quietly. You're the strongest person I know. You just had to remember that. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of feedings and diaper changes and learning to be a mother without someone controlling every decision. Sophia was perfect, healthy, strong, everything Valentina had fought to protect. Then the trial resumed. She returned to court with Sophia in a carrier. The prosecutor had arranged for a private room where she could nurse and care for her daughter during breaks. Domestic violence advocates offered to babysit. Strangers offered support. The prosecutor had one final piece of evidence. Your penthouse had a smart home system, he explained before presenting it. Voice activated, recording everything for convenience and security. It saved audio from your arguments for the past 3 years. Valentina's stomach dropped. 3 years of arguments? 3 years of him berating you, threatening you, saying things no jury can explain away. Do you want to hear it? She looked at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, unaware of the battles being fought for her future. No, Valentina said, but the jury should, all of it. They played excerpts in court. Garrison's voice, cold, cruel, nothing like the charming man he presented publicly. You're worthless without me. No one else would want you. You're lucky I put up with your constant complaining. If you leave, I'll make sure you never see a dime. The jury's faces changed with every clip. Disgust replacing skepticism, horror replacing doubt. This wasn't a man who'd snapped once under stress. This was a man who'd systematically broken down his wife for years. Garrison's lawyers had no defense against his own voice, against 3 years of documented emotional abuse backing up her testimony. The verdict came back in less than 4 hours. Guilty on all charges. Assault, battery. The judge added a restraining order extension and mandated therapy before any unsupervised contact with Sophia. Sentencing would come later. But the message was clear. Money didn't buy immunity, not this time. To every mother who's left an abusive relationship, you broke a cycle. Your children won't grow up thinking violence is love. You're a hero even on days you don't feel like one. Tell me in the comments what gave you the strength to leave. Your story might save someone else's life. Justice came with a gavel and a sentence. But freedom came from finally believing she deserved better. 6 months after the verdict, Valentina stood in her Queens apartment. 2 bedrooms, street noise, neighbors she actually knew. Nothing like the penthouse, nothing like the Connecticut estate. But standing in the nursery she'd painted herself, Sophia sleeping in a second-hand crib, Valentina felt wealthier than she ever had surrounded by luxury. This space was hers, earned, not given, safe, not controlled. Garrison's sentencing had been swift. Assault conviction. Mandatory anger management and therapy. Supervised visitation with Sophia only after completing treatment. Community service. And a public apology. Though his lawyers made sure it was worded carefully enough to avoid admitting full fault, his empire crumbled faster than he'd built it. The board removed him as CEO. Investors fled. Corporate partners canceled contracts. Turns out, being convicted of assaulting your pregnant wife is bad for business. The divorce settlement came through. Generous, because the prenup's abuse clause nullified most of his protections. She got custody, child support, and enough money to rebuild her life on her own terms. She went back to social work. Part-time at first, balancing Sophia's needs with her own desire to help families like the one she'd been. Families trapped by circumstances they couldn't control. Women who needed someone to see them. Then she started something bigger. The Sophia Grace Foundation for Family Safety opened in Philadelphia, funded partially by her divorce settlement and crowdfunding from supporters who'd followed her story. They provided resources Valentina wished she'd had: legal aid for women leaving abusive relationships, temporary housing, job training, therapy, childcare support. Everything she'd needed and hadn't had. Every woman who walks through these doors, she told the opening crowd, Sophia on her hip, deserves to know their worth isn't determined by who wants them. It's inherent, unchangeable, and no one, no matter how much money they have, gets to take it away. The room erupted in applause. Survivors, advocates, people who'd watched her fight and found courage to fight their own battles. She wasn't ready for another relationship. Maybe wouldn't be for years. The idea of trusting someone with her heart, her body, her life again felt impossible. But she noticed men differently now, with clear eyes that assessed respect rather than resources, patience rather than power, kindness rather than control. Someday, she'd trust again. Someday, she'd let someone see her whole, scars and strength together. But only someone who understood. Love wasn't ownership. Pleasure wasn't performance. And her body answered only to her. The first supervised visitation with Garrison happened at a family services center. Neutral ground, social worker present, strict time limits. He looked smaller somehow. Expensive suit hanging differently. Confidence replaced with careful contrition. "I'm sorry," he said, the words costing him everything. "I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I..." "Don't apologize to me." Valentina cut him off. She held Sophia protectively, the baby staring at this stranger with curious eyes. Apologize to her, and then spend your life proving you've changed. That's the only relationship we're going to have. He nodded, didn't argue. For once, he had no control over the narrative. Sophia would grow up knowing her father in supervised doses, with boundaries, with protection. She'd never watch her mother get hurt and think that was normal. That was love. 1 year later, Valentina stood in the Foundation's community room, addressing a group of survivors who'd come for support, resources, and solidarity. Sophia sat on her hip, a year old now, babbling and grabbing at her mother's hair. "I didn't see the red flags," Valentina admitted to the room. "The isolation, the control, the way he made my needs feel like betrayals. But I'm seeing them now, not just in my past, but in your stories." Women nodded, some crying, some angry, all understanding. And together, we're learning that love doesn't demand you disappear. It doesn't track your phone, doesn't dismiss your career, doesn't punish your boundaries. Real love sees you, celebrates you, trusts you. More nodding, a few quiet amens. I know leaving feels impossible. I know pressing charges feels terrifying. I know standing up when the whole world might call you a liar feels like dying. But here's what I learned. You're stronger than you think. You deserve better than you've been told. And your story, however painful, can help save someone else. After the meeting, a young woman approached. Mid-20s, pregnant. Bruise on her arm, poorly covered with makeup. "I'm in the middle of it," she whispered. "What you described. He's perfect in public, different at home. I don't know if I'm strong enough to leave." Valentina took her hand. "You don't have to be strong enough. You just have to be scared enough to try. And we're here to help you do it." The woman cried, nodded, took the resource packet and the promise of safety. Valentina watched her leave and thought, this is why. This is why she'd fought, why she'd testified, Why she'd let strangers judge her story in exchange for one woman, one child, being saved from what she'd endured. That night, putting Sophia to bed in their modest apartment, Valentina felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Not because her life was perfect. It wasn't. Single motherhood was hard. Money was tighter than it had been. Some days she cried in the shower, wondering if she'd made the right choices. But Sophia slept safely, without violence in the next room, without fear determining tomorrow. And that was everything. YouTube-style closing. So what would you do if you saw the warning signs? Would you ignore them like Valentina did, hoping love would fix itself? Or would you trust your instincts and walk away before the first slap? There's no judgment here. Just the truth that recognizing red flags can save your life. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that shine light on what we've been taught to hide. And comment below, what's the red flag you'll never ignore again? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to your sister, your friend, the coworker who always has excuses for her partner's behavior. Because the most powerful thing we can do is break the silence, together. And remember, you deserve a love that doesn't hurt. Always. Healing isn't straight. Some days you're strong. Some days you cry in the shower. But every day you choose yourself is a victory. To everyone who left, who's planning to leave, who's building a new life from the rubble of a toxic one, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments where you are in your journey. Let's celebrate every step, because your story isn't over. It's just beginning.